And Ranking Member Graves for organizing this most important hearing. And of course, thanks to all of the panelists before us this afternoon. I come from Chicago and represent a district that's both city and suburban. And as all of you know, Chicago is at the heart of the nation's transportation networks, including rail, highways, waterways, and also home to two major airports, including one of the nation's busiest. At its root, good transportation and urban planning means access to good jobs, access to health care, and access to school and job training. I'd also like to shed light and shift some focus within this committee to the needs of those too often overlooked in our urban planning and policymaking processes. I represent a district that has many foreign-born individuals like myself and majority Latino, and I know all too well that for too long, people of color and immigrant communities have not been given a seat at the table. Unsurprisingly, urban planning, and I will confess I am an urban planner from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and transportation policies frequently fail to adequately address the needs of working class and minority populations. I'm only one of two members of color on this panel who hail from the Midwest and the only one of Hispanic descent. I pledge to my constituents back home and to those without a seat at the table that I intend to be a voice for those communities that have been adversely affected by this lack of representation. Studies from the Transportation Research Board confirm that immigrants in general and Hispanics and Asians are the fastest growing users of public transit in the country. The gentleman from Amtrak, of course, knows this. In Chicago, inadequate investment in Latino and African American communities has led to people moving out. A neighborhood in my district, Logan Square, for example, has lost over 23,000 long-term Hispanic and African American residents due to rising home costs, increasing problems in transit frequency and reliability, and increasing congestion. The lack of inaction not only hurts us as a nation, but the impacts to communities of color and working class families are profound and lasting. So I would ask any of the panelists who could address this to talk about how we ensure, if we do an infrastructure bill, and I, of course, am very enthusiastic about it, how do we address those inequities? How should we begin to think about them? I think that's an important lens to introduce into the conversation. And lastly, how do we ensure that we do projects like transit-oriented development that in Chicago, for the most part, have contributed to gentrifying communities as opposed to being inclusive and helping create more livable working class and lower income communities?
Well, let me take a stab at that. In part, Congressman, because I'm from outside Chicago and have family there, so I understand exactly the issues that you're talking about. And we talked about this in my written statement. Chicago is a perfect example of where there are jobs in the area. There's no doubt about that, but we have trouble connecting the right communities to those jobs. And obviously, it starts with transit, but it starts really drilling down at looking at those transit programs to figure out, where those bus lines are going to go. And quite frankly, while money doesn't solve all problems, and you can't just throw money at this problem, money is a big part of this. So if we do a big infrastructure bill, we run it through the existing transit programs, maybe refine them. I think that we can help solve that problem, because that's why we're here at the table. That's why the labor movement, we care about this issue for a lot of different reasons, but that's a big part of it. So we're committed to figuring out how to deal with those issues, because we know there's a real disparity there on connecting those people to those jobs.
Mr. Congressman, real quickly, from the American Trucking Association Workforce Development Committee that we're looking at as well, have just initially started to have conversations where we can do things in the city of Baltimore. There are folks inside the cities that really do not know what the opportunities are within our industry. That's clearly understood. And now we're taking a look to see how we can penetrate, to be able to look to make our industry available to those folks that really don't have an idea of really all the careers and the high-paying jobs that could be reached in our industry.
Okay, with that, the committee will be in